What industry do you hope won't exist in 10 years? Story 1. Everything as a subscription. As a tech worker, I understand why it's so popular, but boy do I hate it. Some subscriptions can genuinely offer amazing value to consumers. My problem is the mass adoption of subscriptions on products and services that have no business being a subscription. Those that exist solely so companies can make more money off of you. Not everything should be a subscription. I worked at a place that sold hardware. Buy it once, use it forever. One of the genius board members thought it was a good idea to cut the cost of the device in half, still worth a 400% markup, and sell a yearly subscription. The sales dropped from 85 million in 1 year to 30 the next. The genius board member moved on to another company and probably got a pay raise. Meanwhile, 200 people lost their jobs. It's such a scam. Sooner or later, all the streaming services are going to come together in one exclusive streaming package called Cable Premium Plus. Story 2. Mommy/family vloggers. They're sinister. There needs to be laws to protect these exploited children, and in 10 to 20 years, we're going to see a lot of these kids telling their horror stories and suing their parents. In a podcast I listened to, they talked about a woman who wanted to adopt a baby from Hong Kong, if I recall correctly, and they told her she couldn't post his face online for the first year during the adoption process. So she stopped pursuing the adoption. People like her are the very reason these countries have to make these policies for US adoptions. They know people do it just for clout. They also talked about another woman who adopted a Chinese baby who ended up being too difficult, so she rehomed him when he was 3. That was even the language she used, and she didn't confess until her entire fan base was demanding to know where the kid was because all of a sudden she just pretended like he never existed. The woman was a YouTuber who adopted him from China. She placed her autistic son with a new family in 2020, but only after making monetized content off of him for more than 3 years. As an autistic adult, one of the biggest and most alarming issues I see with the whole autism community, which is made up largely of autism moms, is the widespread and rampant exploitation of autistic children for monetization or attention purposes. My own mother tried to become one such autism mommy vlogger when I got diagnosed with autism in high school, around age 16. She didn't disclose to me that she'd even made a blog about having a child with autism until I came home from a horrible prom night when I was 17, crying due to feeling ostracized. The first thing she said was, "I'm so sorry, honey. Look, I posted about your awful prom on my blog." The blog post she showed me proceeded to talk about how she was the victim and how she felt terrible, simply because she was the mom of a child with autism and the experience of having a normal child had been robbed from her by autism. With mothers acting like this, it's really easy to tell who had kids because they were ready and wanted them, and who had kids because they were just kind of bored with life. If you aren't ready to love someone unconditionally and guide them through anything, then you aren't ready for kids. This happens a lot with married couples feeling pressured into having kids because that just seemed like the next chapter. I think a large part of the issue is society adding the pressure to have kids. It is completely okay to not want children, or to have something else in your life that you'd rather have than children. I feel like when our society moves away from that mindset about children, we'll have less people enabling and supporting these bad parents. Story 3. Pharmacy benefit managers, also known as PBMs. They were supposedly created to control prescription drug costs and manage formularies, but they actually drive prices up. They are one of the many terrible causes of high medical costs in the States. They're the middlemen between drug manufacturers/vendors, providers like hospitals and pharmacies, and health insurers. It's the cyclic interaction between all parties, trying to squeeze a little more money out of each other year after year, that drives the prices up. Invariably, the added costs get passed along to the consumers, which in this case is extra messed up since the consumers are patients. Story 4. The troubled teen industry. Abusing minors for money shouldn't be an industry. As a former student/prisoner, I could not second this enough. The facility I was sent to got shut down a number of years ago, but there are still many other thriving programs. Some of the girls who also went there are now working on a documentary to shed some light on how counterproductive and downright criminal these places are. One of the facilities I went to recently was shut down because of a class action lawsuit. I'm very proud, honestly. I'm so glad I get to speak, eat food, and drink water whenever I want now. In those facilities, they let you drink water with permission or anytime you're above a certain level. It was beyond insane. I was on a lower level for many months because my therapist was essentially trying to break my will. Sadly, it worked. I became compliant. The facilities I went to are in Utah, which has different laws, so my mother essentially signed my life away. I am now permanently disabled from my time in the facilities due to overmedication and medical neglect. The overmedication caused a bleeding peptic peptic ulcer, and the medical neglect happened after I broke my wrist and they accused me of just being dramatic. I wasn't able to feel anything in most of my fingers for years following that. The facility's behavior is not uncommon, sadly. How do places like these get away with this stuff for so long? It doesn't make sense that they aren't more regulated so we wouldn't get stories like these. It's just one of the many ways children are being failed by society and falling through the cracks. Story 5. Mega churches. The thing is, people like them. I go to a very small church. We might have 25 people every Sunday. I've seen numerous churches start up and flourish and have hundreds of people at every service, and wondered how they can start from zero and zoom past us so fast. Every time, the things people say they like is that this new church is huge, bombastic, and has rock music, yelling and lights and flashy everything. People say they want a coffee house, but they show up to a Taylor Swift concert. It's all well and good to say hope these don't stick around, but last I checked, they are growing and they wouldn't grow if people didn't like them. Despite what some people think, megachurches are clearly giving people something that other churches aren't, and what they're giving is a lack of guilt. More specifically, I mean these churches absolve the people of taking any real and measurable action in the face of societal issues. The message is, if you go to church, you're a good person, despite everything else you might do. Megachurches are literally only there to make money and fund political parties, so they peddle a very sanitized version of religion and don't make anyone feel too bad. The people that go just care about feeling like a good person. This is different from being one, and the churches just care about the checkbooks. I knew these places weren't true places of worship the first time I watched a recording of a sermon, and the pastor was telling people that if they donate all their money to the church instead of buying their medications this month, they would be cured by God. Story 6. The natural diamond industry. We can literally grow them in labs, sustainably, and to the same quality, but there will always be people who want natural diamonds sourced unethically. I think the marketing in this industry has been done so brilliantly. It's horrible, but brilliant. Lots of people are convinced that lab-grown diamonds are different from naturally occurring ones. My mom is partly annoying about this. She insists there's nothing like a naturally occurring diamond. Once we were on vacation in a very touristy city. There was a big diamond store and she wanted to go in, so we did. The guy who helped us was the owner and jewelry maker of everything they held in the store, so I asked him whether there was any discernible difference between naturally occurring diamonds and lab-grown ones. He said no. He even showed us. Of course, he later went on a tangent about how naturally occurring ones were more special because they were made after millions of years by Mother Nature. My mom ate this up because it confirmed her beliefs, but the guy was only saying it to get her to buy his $250 earrings. It's unreasonable to prefer a natural diamond. The supply chain for lab-grown diamonds is much more efficient, so today's lab diamonds are about 40 to 50% cheaper than mined diamonds of the same quality. I bet the people that want naturally made diamonds because they're just better are the same people that berate retail workers because it's their job to deal with customers like that. It's a specific type of people that feels entitled to the service of others, even when, or especially when, they aren't getting paid enough, if anything at all. Story 7. Child modeling and anything to do with children being publicized on social media. Parents are literally making thousands by posting pictures of their own children on places like Instagram and advertising Patreon and other similar sites where they give access to pictures of their children in immodest outfits. If I think about the fact that this exists and so many parents are doing it for too long, my blood might actually literally boil. And Patreon allows it. Yet just a couple years ago, they were on a crusade banning artists who drew anime women. Notice I say women. Whether they were tall or full-figured, it didn't matter. If they had an anime face, you were banned for drawing children in a suggestive way. Yet they're completely fine with the exploitation and possible abuse of actual real children. Story 8. I don't know if this falls into the right category, but everything needing Wi-Fi. I bought a scale the other day that needed Wi-Fi before it could read my weight. I have a PS5 with all the media apps I need. Now just give me the option for a dumb TV. My washer, dryer, fridge, and oven also shouldn't need Wi-Fi to be able to do basic operations. Something like 15% of gross revenue from domestic electrical appliances comes from data on selling to service providers, lifestyle groups, etc. Smart TVs send your usage and behavioral data back to the mothership. That data is sold to Netflix, whether you use the streaming service or not, and that data's analysis is sold again up the chain, combined with other data, repurposed and sold again, etc. Data is used for a range of commercial and policy purposes, from product development to marketing insights, a range of strategic objectives, commodities, logistics, predictive analysis, and density mapping. I always wondered how a fridge with Wi-Fi is really that beneficial. Apparently, the benefit is for the companies manufacturing and selling them. That makes more sense. Story 9. For-profit health insurance. Insurers don't use their profits to advance medicine or any other tech. They are middlemen. They are bottlenecks, obstructions to healthcare and to advancement. The entire industry is useless. They dictate treatment decisions that should be made by a doctor and patient. They waste the time of providers, staff, and patients. They further divide the delivery of medical care along socioeconomic lines. They don't make anything. Story 10. Fast fashion. It's terrible for the environment. Fashion accounts for 20 to 35% of the microplastic that ends up in the ocean. It's terrible for the workers. 93% aren't paid a living wage. Child labor and bonded labor are not uncommon, and many of the factories are unsafe. I could keep going. The most messed up part of it is people often don't even wear the clothes. They buy them and then bin them, or wear them once and then donate them, and around 90% of those clothes end up in a textile waste mill. It's recycled, sure, but a better solution would be it never existing in the first place. And if you send the clothing abroad, your good intentions are crippling local markets. The clothes aren't donated. They are sold to local textile traders who sell our old rubbish to a community that has no alternative. I know a lot of people aren't in a position to have clothes made or tailored. Fast fashion is associated with the profligate purchasing of cheap clothes, like shopping halls for example, but fast fashion also exists because people who don't have a lot of money need clothes to go to work, and deserve to feel stylish and attractive too. And I don't have an answer for that aspect of this issue, or how to support the garment workers, but these are things that we are going to have to address at some point anyway, because the current model is not sustainable. Might as well find solutions now. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video, and have a wonderful day. Story 11. Puppy mills. Industrial, commercial mass production of dogs with horrifically poor care. These are the dogs that are sold in pet stores. Yes, every pet store selling puppies comes from mills. No exceptions beyond stores that host adoption events. Also, online brokers like PuppySpot, Puppies.com, etc. There are thousands of these factories that can have up to 700 breeding dogs to pump out puppies. These pups are sold for at least double the cost of responsible breeders. If the puppies live long enough to make it to the storefront, that is. Even the facilities legally licensed by the USDA are held to the most paltry of standards. They're routinely given a pass for violations, if they are ever inspected at all, and there are plenty of facilities that operate without licensing. Of the millions of dogs these farms produce, the breeders are not responsible for what happens to the puppies after the check clears. Pet stores also try to sell them before they die of sickness, and families end up heartbroken when their beloved pet comes down with painful, costly, and sometimes completely avoidable diseases. Getting rid of this industry will at least require people to no longer desire or demand access to any kind of breed, any color, both cheaply and immediately available. Story 12. Factory animal farming. I'm not a hippie, but I love and respect animals. If you wouldn't allow it to happen to your pet, don't pay big businesses to do it to your food. Not to mention, factory farming raises the risk of zoonotic disease outbreaks, what with how cramped and filthy those farms are. And to make matters worse, a lot of factory farms overuse antibiotics on their animals to make up for the atrocious living conditions, because it's cheaper than not packing animals in poop-smeared cages. This is one of the reasons antibiotic-resistant bacterial strains are on the rise. I was raised on a small family farm. I agree, factory farming has to go. Family farms treat their animals well, give them a good life and a clean death, was my mom's motto. They were fed and taken care of every morning before we were allowed to eat, even on Christmas. They all had a name. When Dad didn't like a kill plant, we switched to a more humane one. We knew less stressed animals made a better product. Weird coincidence, I was a healthy weight my entire childhood. We ate lots of our own meat, raw milk, and pie with every meal. A very calorie-rich diet. Once I moved to the city and was eating commercially grown foods, I started packing on the pounds. One brother developed celiac, and my sister and I became gluten and dairy intolerant. We used to shovel grain bins, and we were dairy farmers. Commercially farmed foods did something to us. Story 13. Telemarketers. Real telemarketing died shortly after the federal Do Not Call list. There's a reason you aren't getting phone calls from Macy's or the local furniture store anymore. What you're getting are scam calls, specifically scam warfare from places like India that extracted $5.8 billion from the pockets of Americans last year. And not just any Americans, usually the most infirm, elderly, disabled, or otherwise compromised Americans. At this point, if you have the time, take up all their time if they're real and not a bot. Make them them waste their time on you instead of someone that might be taken in by their ruse. More than a few YouTubers have made it their job to mess with these guys. Last time Microsoft called me, it was 30 minutes of them getting angrier trying to explain the difference between my computer and monitor to me. My wife had to end the call because she got tired of my stupidity, or it'd have been going on for a lot longer. Look, I work in IT. I know exactly how to push your buttons all day. I'll just repeat what my customers tell me. It's cathartic to dump that on a scammer. PSA reminder, don't accidentally give them valuable info while messing with them. Story 14. I work in the restaurant tipping industry, if you will. It's getting out of hand in the USA. You have to tip everywhere and pay extra fees or services due to COVID or inflation. Businesses need to pay their employees, not the customers. I'd rather pay a little higher price than pay a tip. It's not my responsibility to pay their employees. After I went out to eat a few times during the pandemic, I stopped going out to eat. Many people don't want to end it because they use their tips as under-table money, whereas my boss requires us to claim all of our tips, even cash. Customers are required to pay at the front desk, where there are cameras to watch us. Most of the time, he is there overseeing us. He pays way over minimum wage, $15 an hour for us, which he doesn't have to. The customers don't even have to pay service fees or inflation fees or any other fees. The boss just raises the prices accordingly. Story 15. Third-party student loan consultants. I used to work as a federal student loan collector for a Department of Education contractor. I have horror stories about borrowers who were purposefully deceived by these people, the worst of which was someone who thought a consolidation she paid for completely eliminated her obligation. What these legally gray predators do is trick people into paying to have free paperwork done on their behalf. Sure, they have the tiny fine print disclosures, but they're extremely predatory and make me sick. I paid $25 grand over 2 years to rehabilitate a $5,000 student loan. I was happy as heck when I thought it was all clear. Then I found out that not only was I not all set, but that I still owed 38 grand. It's a long story. I'm old. In fact, I'm so close to retirement age that Social Security has already sent me a notice stating that I won't get my benefits because it will be taken to pay my loans. Back in the early 80s, I graduated from high school and went to the state university. I took out a $5,000 student loan to do so, but I also have chronic depression and it flared badly during finals week and I had to drop out of school because at the time, mental illness was seriously stigmatized. So I went to work. I paid $75 a month until 1991, when the US went into a recession and I lost my job because the company went under. I called the business that the government paid to service my student loan and told them I had no job and asked if I could pay $35 to $50 a month instead of $75. They said no. End of discussion. At the time, that $75 was nearly a month's worth of groceries for me. So I stopped paying them and went into default. In the US, you can't just not pay a student loan. Once it goes into default, your credit rating tanks, and the government starts doing things like not allowing you to take out any other loans or get grants, and it takes all your tax returns and stuff like that until the debt is paid. And even when you go bankrupt, you can't discharge the debt, but they also turn the account over to a professional credit collection agency, and there's some fine print in there that says the second they turn it over to an agency, the agency gets to charge me for any collection costs. So I dodged the collection agency for a decade. I had to, since when they tanked my credit rating, they also tanked my ability to work, as I was a bookkeeper. I had a hard time getting hired as they would check my credit rating as part of the background check process for an employment bond, and I couldn't pass. The assumption is that being in financially bad straits apparently automatically makes you a thief. So I worked low-end jobs to keep a roof over my head. Then at some point, I decided I was just tired of the whole thing and I really wanted to go back to college. My husband is a disabled veteran, so the VA would help me with the cost of my education. I went back to college and loved it. Things were going great. One day, when the collection agency called, I actually stopped and listened. I decided that I could afford the $200 a month they were asking for and that it couldn't take long to pay off the tiny amount that was still left on the loan when I went into default. I was wrong. I spent 5 years paying $200 a month because of all the interest and penalties. Then they finally sent me a letter stating that my loan was rehabilitated. I thought that meant it was paid off. I was wrong again. About a month later, I got the notice from the Department of Education. My loan had been rehabilitated and I was no longer in default and I was back on regular payments, and I only owed another 38 grand. When I asked about the payments I had been making, they told me those were just collection costs. When I tried to talk to the DOE, the bank, the collection agency, and a lawyer, they all said it was my own fault for going into default and that I had no right rights whatsoever to fight it. The new payment schedule was $496 a month, more than my monthly income. As the rules had changed over the years, I was able to apply for an income-based repayment plan, which would have been awesome in 1991, but that's another story. I paid $128 a month for another few years, and then I became unemployed due to being physically unable to work. Arthritis, I had to have a knee replaced at 54 years old because all my joints are crap. So my income-based payment plan is zero, which means that the amount of the loan keeps going up because of the interest, and I haven't been able to get the balance down. Then the pandemic hit and I haven't worked at all since 2020. So yeah, over the years, I figure I've paid in about 25 grand on a loan that was only 5,000, and I'm still left owing 38,000 or more. Student loans destroyed my life. When my husband passes, I will be left with literally nothing as I've had a lifetime of mental illness, bad credit, and low-paying jobs. So I have no savings and will have no social security. Welcome to America. It breaks my heart that in places like America, you can make a decision to better your life at the age of 20 and it'll derail your entire life until it's ruined. College in America is such a mess. Even if you aspire to be in a career that requires a degree, you can't get that degree unless you have parents that will pay for it. I feel for kids whose parents refuse to help them with college because they have no idea that student loans are not a viable option for anyone anymore. Story 16. U.S. tax prep. They're unnecessary middlemen with artificially maintained necessity due to lobbying and bribery. I understand that many people have a reason to use professional tax services. In fact, I'm one of them. Most people don't need this though. There should be a better alternative for the average taxpayer, especially considering how confusing and fluid the government system is. As a tax preparer, I agree. There is absolutely no reason for an individual who works a job and receives wage income needs to file a tax return in the computer age. Employers should be able to withhold the correct amount and leave it at that. It would save the IRS paper and man hours and save a lot of people a lot of frustration. This is how it's done by plenty of other countries. People with rental income, self-employment income, and similar would still need to file a return. Story 17. MLMs and pyramid schemes. A friend sent me one of these a few years ago and I calculated how many people were involved at around level 7, and it was greater than the number of people on Earth. When I explained that to them, they said they basically didn't care as long as they could potentially get theirs, even if it meant their friends were getting shafted. It's hard to respect someone after they tell you something like that. My cousin and his wife are caught in one of these. I did some research about this phenomenon, and apparently once someone is caught in it, it's almost useless to try to get them out until they're ready to be helped. The best thing to do is to explain the structure and flaws to somebody before they get introduced to it. So I sat my other cousins down and talked them through what exactly Amway in this case was, and why the only way to really make money through them is to push other people into getting involved. It really does behave scarily like a virus. Story 18. The concert ticket mafia. Companies like Ticketmaster, StubHub, Live Nation. I know those entities aren't really an entire industry. They basically have the market monopolized though. A few years ago, I was trying to get concert tickets. The venue had this system set up to keep scalpers from grabbing a bunch of tickets. I logged into the website at the exact time the website said and had to keep hitting refresh for an hour and a half. By the time I could get in, there was one ticket left. Then, guess who started advertising tickets? Yup, Ticketmaster. The venue probably had a small number of tickets actually available on the site, and then sold most of them to Ticketmaster intentionally. Ticketmaster's entire business model is being the bad guy so venues can secretly charge higher prices. Those fees don't all go to Ticketmaster. They get split between them and the venue. To be more clear, many artists get cuts as well, and Ticketmaster is now massive enough that they own many venues. Story 19. 24-hour propaganda media outlets masquerading as news. There is a case to be made that the world would be better off without 24-hour news channels, for many reasons. The sensationalism, 24-hour news channels often prioritize sensational stories to keep viewers engaged, which can lead to a distorted view of the world. Anxiety and stress constantly being bombarded with negative news can lead to increased anxiety and stress levels, which can have negative impacts on mental and physical health. We could have more thoughtful and nuanced discussions without the pressure to fill 24 hours of airtime. News channels would have more time to focus on in-depth reporting and analysis, which would lead to more thoughtful and nuanced discussions. Less pressure to create breaking news with less time to fill. News channels would have less pressure to create breaking news stories, which can often be inaccurate or misleading. More emphasis on positive news. With the need to fill 24 hours of airtime with sensational stories, news channels would have more opportunities to focus on positive news and development. comments, which would help to create a more balanced and accurate view of the world. Of course, it's worth noting that there are also arguments to be made in favor of 24-hour news channels, such as the importance of staying informed in real time, especially in emergency situations. Nevertheless, it is impossible to imagine a world in which the 24-hour news channels are reduced, and the benefits outweigh the downsides. Thanks for watching until the end. Please leave your story in the comments. I would also love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.